Let me first introduce the moderator for the session, an old friend of mine, Reema Khan, who's also the CEO and founder for Green Sands.
And then obviously we cannot forget PhD founder and CEO of Paradromics, Matt Engel.
Please put your hands together for Reema and Matt. Thank you.
Hello and Assalamu alaikum. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. It's my first time actually speaking at Open. Many of you already, I already see so many faces. So I started Green Sands Equity about 7 years ago, which is an investment firm based in Silicon Valley and Zurich. And we invest in deep tech, space, and also a little bit in therapeutics. Today, I am really happy and excited because I always feel the best way to know someone is not to know about their history of where they come from, what they studied, what they did. The best way to know about someone is to know what they care about, what they value, what their dreams are. And today I'm sitting next to one of the founders of one of my portfolio companies, Paradromics, which represents everything that I want to align with to say, this is what I want to see for the future of humanity in making the world better for all of us. So with that, I hand it over to Matt to introduce himself because that was the shortest introduction ever. So Matt, just say something about Paradromics, what it does, and yourself and your background.
Thanks, Reema. And thank you, everybody, for inviting me today. Let me get a quick show of hands. Who has heard of brain-computer interfaces? Okay, I love that. And when we started the company, we spun out of Stanford in 2015. And if I had asked for people to raise their hands in the audience, I think about 10 of you would have raised your hand. But as you can see, we're going through a neurotech revolution right now. And the reason why people are very excited about brain-computer interfaces is because they're essentially modems for the brain. They can connect to a brain, connect to a computer, and pass data in between. And that means that someone who's blind, we might not be able to regrow them a new eye, but we can take a picture from a computer and send it to their brain. That's happening right now in clinical trials. For someone who has a spinal cord injury, we can't allow them to move their hands again yet, but we can take data out of their motor cortex and let them control a computer. We can even let people who can't speak any longer speak through a computer. And so that's what I'm excited about, and that's what I'm passionate about.
So I want to take it a step back first and then get started. So the idea is even more important today because you're talking about connecting the human mind to a computer, where everyone's talking about kind of basically creating our own mind outside of us, which is artificial intelligence. One question that comes up often when I talk about your company to people is that pretty much any industry or any product or service that can be amplified by artificial intelligence is going to be extremely important. What role does artificial intelligence play at all, if any, in brain-computer interfaces?
So I'll answer your question, and then I'll answer an even more interesting question. So the first question, what does artificial intelligence do for brain-computer interfaces? Artificial intelligence is really good at cleaning up messy signals, filling in the gaps. And so what artificial intelligence can do for BCI right now is for a system that is trying to help someone speak again, it can allow them to use their brain implant to speak more quickly. And then even if the brain implant has some errors, it can fill in the gaps and make the language that comes out seamless. Because as many of us know, large language models are really, really advanced now and can clean up language errors. So for someone like Stephen Hawking, who is completely paralyzed and needs to use a brain-computer interface to communicate, BCI plus AI can be totally transformative. Now, what's interesting is the question, what can BCI do for AI? And if we think about it, right now, all of our interaction with advanced AI models happens through natural language. So if you want to create a picture, you prompt Gemini or ChatGPT to make a picture. If you want to spin up an AI agent to go do something on your behalf, you essentially talk to it through a prompt. But what's interesting is that I just told you that there are people who are paralyzed who are connecting their brains to computers to restore speech, which is language. And what that means is that those first people who get brain implants as a restorative therapy are going to have a profound way of interacting with AI that even we don't have. They're going to be able to connect their brains directly to AI.
Okay, so let's get into the stuff that we weren't supposed to talk about. So when I first met Matt was in 2018 when he was giving a talk as a research scientist at Stanford. And I thought he was crazy. It looked like a bunch of, ice picks that you stick in the brain and you're connecting data. And he was claiming that he could conduct more data and get more data out of the brain than Elon Musk's Neuralink by 20 times more data. So I think before we go into all the applications, why don't we describe to our audience what your product actually looks like and how exactly it works?
All right, I have one in my hand today. This is a high data rate brain-computer interface. So this has been clocked. This is the world record holder for information transfer rate for brain-computer interfaces. It can transfer 200 bits per second from a brain to a computer. And just for context, Neuralink, Elon Musk's company, the highest information transfer rate they've reported is about 10 bits per second. So yeah, 20x. Why is that important? Because fundamentally, I just said brain-computer interfaces are modems, and if we think about how the early internet transformed with data rates, like everyone go back and think about what they used the internet for in the 90s, even in 2000. In 2010, Netflix, who remembers Netflix when they sent DVDs around? Just to date us a little bit. Yeah, they used to send DVDs in the mail and they would have thumbprints on them, and it was like really hard actually to clean them off. And then in 2010, they became a real-time streaming company. It wasn't because it was this like brilliant eureka moment. It was just because they didn't have the data. Enough people didn't have enough download speed to do it before then. And brain-computer interface applications are gated the same way. The more we push the frontier of data, the more things we can do with it.
Okay, so I want to describe the product still a little bit because I have a picture up. So I have a picture of myself also holding it in the kitchen. So it's, as you saw, it's like a little Velcro thing that goes in your brain. And then there's a little wire that runs from under your skin. No one can see it behind your ear. And then there's like a little Holter monitor, which is similar to what a pacemaker would look like. And so no one knows you're wearing it. And you can actually speak like whatever your thoughts are, they show up. Now let's go into the philosophical part of it. So when I first met you, I said, wait, Matt, does that mean I can really figure out what everyone's thinking? First of all, we never want to know what everyone's thinking. You mean God doesn't care about what you're thinking God cares about? What do you intend to do? So that's interesting. What I learned from Matt was that when we try to speak a word, when we form the intention of saying that word, it's the same part of your brain that actually controls your hand or the movement and where you intend to do it. So therefore, there's speech and inner speech. So can you tell us exactly how it works and which part of the brain, what signal, and how far the capability of that goes?
Okay, so I'll start with telling you what we're doing in our clinical trial next year, which is everything that we do.
We had to pause right now for applause. We're in clinical trial, which means we're going into humans.
You can. Everything that we do with our muscles. And how do our muscles know what to do? It's because our brain sends signals that tells them when to contract in a coordinated fashion. And the signals to tell the body what to do come from the motor cortex. And also everything that I'm saying right now is being controlled by an area of the motor cortex called 6V. It's a very specific area that controls the speech articulators like the lips, the tongue, and the larynx. Now, if we put a brain implant in that area, we can see exactly how someone was trying to move their mouth and their articulators, even if they're completely paralyzed and can't move them. And so that's how we'll create speech for people who have lost their voice. That also means that it's not a brain reading application. It's really an intention reading application. Now, you can actually read someone's brain. Everyone right now, if you're paying attention to me, I am in your superior temporal gyrus. That's the part of your brain that represents the sounds associated with language. It's also, if you're sitting here listening and thinking, this is boring, it's the same place where your inner speech resides, which means that if you take the same device that I showed you and you put it in the superior temporal gyrus, it can allow you to verbalize your inner speech, which is really important because for some
You don't want to verbalize it.
yeah, and they don't put it there. But for people who have suffered from stroke and have actually lost the motor part of their brain, it means that we can actually shortcut that and allow them to speak from their inner voice. And so what you're going to see in BCI plus AI applications is that in clinical trials, we're going to keep on going up the chain. Starting with motor, then it's looking at like a phoneme, the sound representations of speech. But there will be clinical trials where we look at the semantic aspects of speech, and we start decoding out even before things get sequenced into words. And that's going to be wild because people are going to be able to prompt really powerful AIs by thinking abstractly.
I want to go a little bit more into the whole Elon story again. So, how many years ago was it that he came to our office? 4, 5?
We met in 2020.
Okay, so in 2020, Elon Musk shows up at our office and he spends 4 hours there and says he wants to buy our company. And we're like, no, Matt, we're not selling. We're going to do better. Tell us about the difference between the speed at which we lead and basically put out the speech using our device versus Elon's. I have a cute idea about this. I'm going to speak at this pace because we had a video which we didn't bring, at which Paradromic's device enables you to speak, and Matt is going to speak at the pace of Elon's device. So you're going to say, hi, my name is Matt, and I will say, hi, my name is Reema. You do it at Elon's speed, and I'll do it at your speed. You go first.
Oh my God, that's actually hard.
You could do
Well,
it.
they haven't actually demonstrated speech yet. What they've done is they've showed that someone can type. And what they do is they take a computer mouse and they click on letters and they type things out.
That directly the words.
It's probably the most direct way to think of it is for everyone who has gone through the annoying process of typing a movie title through the remote control in Netflix or Prime. It's essentially like that. It's using a soft key.
I'm going to do it if you're not going to do it. Try it.
I don't know. How am I going to do 10 words per minute? Like that's...
So they do 10 words per minute. And how many do we do?
Well, the clinical trial that we're following on right now is doing 60 words per minute. And we are going to have 20. No, we didn't do that. We didn't do that. That's the researchers agency. We're working against our trial that starts next year.
We're going to do more than
We're going to have
Yeah.
at least twice the data.
120 words per minute.
Yeah.
Now you can clap.
Thanks, Reema.
So let's also share, because of the audience we have here, they have a strong connection to these countries. So let's talk about our Saudi Arabia adventure that we did together.
Okay, yes.
So Matt came to me and said, Matt, I love you. I got to do this. We're going to win this. But, we need someone with deep pockets. Like there's Elon. His company's valued at $9 billion, right? And his company doesn't even have anywhere close to the product that we have right now. And here we are. And no one wants to touch a competitor. We're the only company in BCI that is a direct competitor to Elon Musk's Neuralink, right? So I said, well, let's see. What do we do? I'm like, well, let me see. Like, what are the countries that don't really love Elon? And then I'm like, Wes, I have friends in Saudi Arabia. And funny enough, I think I was speaking at Leap and Neom reached out to me and they said, can we have a meeting with you? And I sat down and they asked me, so what do you care about? And like I said today, I'm not just saying it just because Matt's here. It is literally the most exciting company that I'm most proud of. So I said, well, here's my company, Paradromics. If you care about me, you would do this. Next thing we know, Neom comes in and puts in $30 million. And recently, just a week ago when we were both in Saudi Arabia, what did we do with the Ministry of Health?
We just signed a memorandum of understanding with the Ministry of Health to run clinical trials in Riyadh. And so we're super excited about that partnership.
Yeah, and the first surgery is there, right? The fun part was that the surgeon was so excited and we said, this is where we put it in. And I mean, even I learned how to do the surgery. I'm not going to do it on any of you, don't worry. But it looks like an EpiPen, looks easy because they have a dummy in their office in Austin and they show you how it's done. But apparently the surgeon was so excited. He said, are you sure you only want me to put it on this part of the brain? I can do it here. I can do it there. So very excited about it. Let's go a little further. When people say that you can get a blind person to see or you can help people do the things that they can't do otherwise, the reality of a person who's never had vision for them to be able to see the world compared to someone who's born with eyes, it's like not knowing how they're perceiving it and how you're perceiving it, but functionally it's about the same. So tell us about what the difference is and how indistinguishable reality becomes as to how it is versus how we experience it.
So right now, everyone who's received a brain implant for sensory restoration or motor restoration had that before they got the brain implant. And so the maps that organize the information for vision or for movement existed. And we know that they persist even after an injury. And so that's part of what we can restore when we give someone a brain implant. We actually don't have any idea what it would be like to go to someone who has never had vision ever, or someone who has never been verbal ever, and give them a brain implant and try to enable that therapy. The science would be totally off the map, but very
But
interesting.
Elon says he can do that.
What did you say?
Elon says he can do that.
Well, I guess he can then.
Okay, how about we give a little bit of the landscape of the brain-computer interface industry, the various companies that are doing something in it, and how are we different from that? And where do they sit? Because a lot of times I'll mention Paradromics and they'll say, oh, well, we know Synchron, or we know some other company, or Cognition. Can you give us a little bit of the landscape of them? We respect all of them, but they're not doing the same thing.
So there are a lot of different ways of trying to guess what's going on in the brain. So we can start with the things that you can buy on Amazon. You can buy devices that will sit on the skin and measure electrical activity on your scalp. And what does that measure? Well, it measures whenever the brain is doing, all the neurons are doing something highly correlated. It can pick up things like how focused are you? Are you about to initiate some sort of action? Really kind of coarse signals. If we wanted to put a data rate on it, best case, about 1 bit per second is what you can get from wearables. Now, there are downsides of wearables. One of them is you have to wear them. And so there's a company, Synchron, which actually just raised $200 million that came up with an idea to allow for a brain-computer interface that would be put up through the jugular and into the blood vessels of the brain. Now, the advantage it has over a wearable device is that it's there. It doesn't get in the way. It's more ergonomic, doesn't move around. Disadvantage, of course, is it's something going through your blood vessel. That device has a bit rate of also about 1 bit per second. Now, when you want to start getting more data out of the brain, and that's basically a button press, like once per second. So it's not huge. You don't get to do Paradromics Neuralink stuff, but for some people who are paralyzed, it's still very useful. As you want to start getting closer to the brain, you have to go under the skull. And then there are devices that sit on the surface of the skull, almost like on the surface of the brain, like a blanket, that can measure when tens of thousands of neurons are active at the same time. And that can allow you to do things maybe like control a cursor kind of okay, but it taps out at around that data rate. If you want to start doing the stuff that I was describing earlier, or even if you want to restore speech or you want really good cursor control, you actually have to get into the layers of the brain, get close to the individual neurons that are the source of the signal, and talk to individual neurons and talk to a lot of them. And so that's what Paradromics and Neuralink do. They record from individual neurons at scale. And
can we talk about the stadium analogy that we use to explain why it's important to be so close in proximity to where you're getting the data from compared to further away, and then using AI to somehow error correct because it's not the same day?
Yeah, definitely. So we can see some microphones in the front row. We have some microphones here. You can see already when I get far away from my microphone, the audio quality drops a lot. Now, what that means is that if I drop a microphone onto each table and I start listening, I'm going to hear your conversations and it's going to be very interesting. But if I get out of this building and I take the same microphones and I put them in the parking lot, we're not going to hear very much. Now, if everyone got up and a huge thunderous round of applause for Reema at the end of this, which I'm expecting, then even in the parking lot, you would know what had happened. But that's kind of the limit of your resolution. And when you're outside of the skull, that's really what you're dealing with. If you're in a blood vessel or if you're on the surface of the brain, but you're not close to the neurons, it's like being in the hallway. You can maybe pick up on more subtle trends of what's going on in the room, but you just don't have the voices.
Okay, I want to complain about something very publicly in front of everyone. So one
my
thing
God.
that Matt and I get into arguments about is that Matt is so conservative and he speaks like a doctor or a scientist that no, it's not that much. No, it's this little. Can we for a second take that away and talk about the potential of brain-computer interfaces and how far this technology can go in terms of its applications and the areas it's in? And every time I mention the super soldiers, you're like, no, 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 no. But this company
Don't say
came out
super
of funding
soldiers.
from DARPA, where that was some of the thought behind it. So let's talk a little bit about the future of it as to what could be the applications.
Okay, so this is the reason why we right now have hundreds of millions of dollars flowing into the brain-computer interface industry, is because it does represent the end state of human technology
Sam
integration.
Altman has one. Everyone's going to have a brain-computer interface company the same way people had rockets.
So essentially, everything that you experience, let's take vision, for instance, all of your vision comes to you from your eyes, to your thalamus, to your visual cortex. It's just electrical activity. So a brain-computer interface of sufficient resolution is indistinguishable from reality with respect to vision. And so it's the ultimate AR/VR platform. Everything that you hear comes to your brain through your cochlea. It's 20,000 neurons projecting electrical activity. That means if you have a brain implant in your primary auditory cortex, it can supply you with sound that's indistinguishable from your ear. You can be completely immersed in a reality that is produced by a
brain-computer interface that will happen eventually. And then we can think of it in sort of
strange dystopian way, or we can also think of it for all of the interesting things that it could bring. And I gave the example that I was in Mycenae over the summer. It's the ancient Greece, the citadel of ancient Greece during the Trojan War. And today it's just kind of ruins and large boulders, but you can see the footprint of the city. But if I had a sufficiently advanced brain-computer interface, I could have seen the city build itself up to the state of 3,000 years ago, and I could have walked around in that completely immersive environment. It could have been populated by AIs that were speaking ancient Greek, and I could have spoken with them, and because I have a translator in the loop, I would have known what they were saying. That sounds really crazy and futuristic, but it's just a matter of having a high enough resolution brain-computer interface in your visual and auditory centers.
I know we can read from the brain. Can we write into the brain?
You can read and write. Reading is reading out intention, like the clinical trial that we're doing right now, allowing people to speak, to move robotic prosthetics. Writing is sensory.
Okay, on. Of course, we can riff off of all of this all day long, but if there are any questions in the audience that we can answer, we're happy to take them.
Very interesting topic. Thank you very much. I did not know this existed. So my question is more coming from the fictional perspective. So I'm recently read the book, Dan Brown's book, Secret of Secrets. And in that book, the plot is around brain implantation and surgeries to, epileptic patients to harness more information, make them spies, and combining them with LSDs to enhance the brain activity. So I just want to take your take on that. What is that? Does it really make sense in terms of the information that's provided there? And is something that is being discussed in the industry?
I haven't read the book, but the question is, could you make a super spy with the brain-computer interface? So was that the gist question? I think so, yes.
Yes. But I think the more interesting question is that what we as a society want to use this technology for? And I would say no.
Okay, so speaking of that, I want to again allow more questions, but I have a very good friend who was a doctor and a researcher at Stanford, and he committed suicide recently in Nolan. You heard about that. And he actually was leading the effort to find a way to get patients who have severe depression and are suicidal to get out of it. He had done so much research and had made a lot of progress. But in the end, ironically, he committed suicide. So we don't appreciate how hard that level of depression is to treat. What role do you think brain-computer interface can play in that, if at all?
What we see right now is that there have been a lot of successes with device-based therapies for depression. There are brain stimulators that can help people who have severe depression. What I would say that we don't have right now in the market, or even really robustly in clinical trials, are ways of reading out when those things are working other than clinical readout, like how someone reports their mood. I think what I'm most excited about that brain-computer interfaces can do for depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, mental health in general, is that they can read out mental states. The same kind of devices that can read out whether someone's intending to speak or intending to move can read out things like if they are feeling depressed. And I think if we want to look at diabetes, for instance, one of the biggest breakthroughs in diabetes treatment was the ability to measure blood sugar. I remember my grandfather had diabetes, and just being able to do the at-home finger prick was a big deal. He died before continuous glucose monitors were available, but now people with diabetes live a much more empowered life because they have the ability to have real-time glucose measurements.
Talk about that too, actually. I'm glad you asked that question. Talk about what is the potential for these implants in helping us develop the treatments for them?
Well, if we had markers for things like depression, compulsion, obsession, then we would know when medicines are working. We would know when neurostimulators are working. We'd be able to have a feedback loop that happened without us having to consciously be reporting to a doctor, and it could be very fast. And so I think that's quantifying mental health and making it available real time in the same way that a continuous glucose monitor makes glucose levels available real time. That's how we're going to really make inroads on mental health in a way that we can't right now.
It's interesting that I don't know if any of you have ever been to a psychologist or psychiatrist's office. If you fill out the form where they say, do you have this, all of us have every disease. Because it looks like, oh yeah, sometimes I do think that. Sometimes this happens too. So the point is, when we have to report our symptoms and how we're feeling and what we're really doing and how we're doing with the medicine is not so accurate.
Even just what level of pain do you have? You know, like if you ask my grandmother lived through the Great Depression.
She shouldn't have that alarm cough. And you go, what kind of pain do you have? She's like,
you know, and then I have coworkers that they would like stub their toe when it's 11. And so
yeah, that's true. So just to put things back on the rails, because when they get a little off, that in reality, what we really expect from brain-computer interfaces, what they will do in the next 5 years, the next 10 years, and 20 years, you want to lay out that map for us? And don't be so conservative about the 20-year one, but for now, let's just keep it real.
Yeah. I think what we can expect is that brain-computer interfaces right now are on a trajectory like traditional semiconductor company. I think if you want to look at how they will evolve, look at early Intel, look at Qualcomm, look at NVIDIA today. Every 3-4 years, another brain-computer interface will hit that has twice the capabilities of the preceding one. And that kind of doubling means that you can go from restoring speech, restoring computer control, to immersive, crazy AR/VR world in not too much time. I think maybe for the larger community, then what it means is, well, what do we want to do with the technology? And so one of the things I've
been thinking about a lot is we're here in Silicon Valley.
Like looking retrospectively at the last 20 years of tech, most people are actually less happy when they have their smartphone open. The last generation of technology was built, you know, a lot of the time you think you're not paying for the product, but that's because you're part of the product. And we have these intrusive notifications. I think that tech has had a lot of negative externalities, if you want to say that. But what's cool about brain-computer interfaces is that they're going to produce a lot of positive gains. In the pursuit of this next generation computing platform, we could cure blindness, cure deafness. We can help people with paralysis to move around and regain autonomy in their world. And I think
skeletal bodies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very realistic.
That's going to happen. And we can think about, as we build out these new kind of tech applications, how we want to do it. Can we do it in a way that's affirming to what it is to be human rather than like riding roughshod over our attention span.
In life, I feel as a human being, it's a cycle, it's a feedback loop, right? So when I physically feel exhausted, I think of fewer things that I want to do because I feel that constraint by my body that even though my mind is ready to do all that, like, I really can't do this, I can't get out of bed, I can't do this. So I feel that kind of enablement of our bodies, which decay over time, whether it's from aging or it's from our health, if we can give ourselves a little bit more support or a lot bit more support with the brain-computer interfaces, then the respect that we have for the mind, for it to be able to operate at the pace it wants to, can be restored. So it's a very human-centric technology. I will open it up for one or two more questions. Go ahead.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Matt. So a two-part question. If you can talk a little bit about what is the state of the art on the right interfaces, like what kind of granularity what are you right now? Not everywhere. And second part would be, you talked a lot about sensory part. Have you guys experimented with something like in the prefrontal cortex? Where do we stand? Where is the state of technology in terms of going into thoughts, which are not really sensory based? So, yeah.
So I would say that the state of the art right now on right for neurotech, it is that we have retinal implant devices right now. There's one called the Reema that's recently was acquired by Science Corp that is allowing for what's called form vision, which means that someone with a retinal implant can look at a written character and identify the character by kind of zooming in on it. We have some brain implants into visual cortex that can make kind of rudimentary pictures with dots. I think maybe one of the most exciting areas of writing in is happening at the University of Pittsburgh, where people who have robotic hands that are being controlled by their motor cortex, there's a return path, a brain implant in the somatosensory cortex that handles touch that allows them to feel whether they're grabbing something as a hard or soft object. You can touch their fingers and they'll know which finger they're touching. That's kind of the state of the art in right now. To your question, to my knowledge, all of the right going on in the brain is either happening in the sensory areas or it's happening in deep brain areas related to things like mood and like movement disorders like Parkinson's. There isn't like a high resolution right happening into
Cognitive areas, we system to be right in thought.
Those things just haven't been done yet, but they will. Those clinical trials will happen over the next 5 years.
That was a really interesting question because I was a math major. So we often talk about how mathematical concepts, when we think about them abstractly, they're very different kind of thinking, which doesn't require language. You don't have to understand any language like English or whatever in order for you to reason through them. And that kind of thinking, for that to be captured and understood, would be very powerful. But that's not where the focus is right now. It's more about restoration of our abilities than, and of course, like, it's not just restoration. Like, obviously, the people who type may become the fastest in the world, more so than the ones that actually have no disability. So we will become super at all the things that this is restoring. It wouldn't be normal.
Even right now, I mean, it takes tens of milliseconds for the intention to move, to travel through your body down to your hand. So, for esports, someone with a brain implant would have a substantial advantage over someone who didn't.
Thank you, Matt and Reema. It's been great to see what you guys are doing at Paradromics.
I work for a tech company based in Dubai.
We do cybersecurity and AI. It'd be great to understand what's your plans to transition from the stage you're currently at to sort of market dominance, given that's what we do, help companies from implementation stage to market dominance. So I'd love to understand what your guys' plan is for the future to take over.
Wow, brain-computer interface with plans to take over. That sounds pretty scary. I'll tell you, I mean, I think that there's room for a lot of success in the brain-computer interface world. Morgan Stanley estimated that the near-term healthcare applications are $500 billion. If we went to imagine what this next computing platform could be worth when it extends beyond restoration, it's more than $1 trillion. Everyone's going to take a piece of that and everyone's going to specialize. Where we're going to specialize and where we're going to excel is in data, safety, and durability. In my opinion, the future of building these really advanced applications, safety is table stakes. No one wants to put a brain implant in their brain that's not safe. Performance really fundamentally comes down to information transfer rate. How much data can you get in and out? Right now, we're leading in that area. And then the third point, which I think is often
Overlooked is durability. When you have a
brain implant that's going to be surgically implanted, removal and upgrade is another brain surgery. And so from our perspective, we want to make sure these devices last for 10 years plus. And that's someplace where we've put a lot of effort in. And it's a place where I think we've, compared to Neuralink, put a lot more effort and built a more rugged device.
Yeah, so I just went, it's how many monkeys did they kill? And our sheep still like Reema. Sorry. I won't. I need to stop doing that because I'm an investor in SpaceX. Elon, we love you. So speaking about where the market is going to be and how huge it's going to be and all those complicated applications, let's remember you're talking to the hardware people here. This is the hardware, and some of the applications that you all are talking about is the software part of it as to what you'll do with the data. We're just making sure we enable the platform that allows other people to build those applications.
So I'm a researcher and working on bio-inspired memories, where we are trying to build computational models of the human declarative memory system. And one of the things that we noticed is that in study, trying to correlate that with studies in neuroscience, there isn't a whole lot of progress that uses the brain-computing interface technology. So if you could comment on what would be the impact of this on neuroscience literature, because a lot of it is still civil and recorded and slowly building of it. Getting people out of cognition is still very hard in those. So could you comment on the impact of this on the study of neuroscience?
Absolutely. A lot of neuroscience has still been studying single cells, and one of the reasons why I was working on this technology originally as a postdoc at Stanford is because most of us think that the exciting aspects of neural processing and human cognition happen at the level of large populations of cells and how they encode information together. If we want to understand how that's happening in a human, we need not only a at-scale way of reading out brain areas, but we need one that's going to be stable and safe. Now, up until very recently, there have been limited options if you wanted to run clinical trials and ask questions in humans. The hardware just wasn't that great. There's a system that was invented in the late 80s, and that's been the state of the art up until present day. What's exciting about now having high-quality hardware with the ability to record from many, many more neurons is we can start asking more science questions with that. And Paradromics is actually in the process of putting together a clinical partnership program that I think we'll announce later this month that will specifically be aimed at getting our devices to leading research labs so that they can ask questions with our device.
Previously, you talked about the negative effects of the technology when humans were part of the product. So once it goes public, the brain computer, and if someone cannot afford it, can it be possible that ads start coming in the mind or you start controlling because...
It's a good question.
Yeah,
there was a Black Mirror episode where someone got a brain implant and then found out that they were on a freemium model. That's not our commercialization plan. In the US and in many other countries, if you have a disability that requires you to get a brain implant, you can get one, and it can be paid for either by state insurance like Medicare, Medicaid, or by a private insurance company.
goal for these devices
Is to have them reimbursed. It's good for patients because they don't have to pay too much out of pocket. It's good for companies because you can command a much higher price for a medical device that's reimbursed. I mean, in some ways, actually, part of my education campaign around BCI markets is there is this presumption that BCI markets won't be large until every single person on Earth gets a BCI. That's completely wrong. If you're selling into a serious unmet medical need, you can charge $100,000 for a device and get that reimbursed. There aren't many people who will out of pocket pay that much for the next cell phone. And so what's naturally going to happen is the first markets, these devices are going to be $100,000+ reimbursed by Medicare, Medicaid, reimbursed by private insurers. The price is slowly going to come down to be more in line with like deep brain stimulators, 50, 60K. And then at that point, when 1 million people have brain implants, we'll be at a place where we can bring the cost of manufacturing down to a more like a consumer cost level. But for now, I don't see a world where people are going to be forced to pay out of pocket for these.
Another question, Matt.
So I have a few more questions. Do you guys have some extra time? Is that okay?
I have time.
Yeah. Okay. We can take 5 more minutes from the actual time and continue with it.
Hi, I don't know if this was addressed earlier, but it just popped up in my mind. And I was wondering how you guys plan to address privacy and data security and like private thoughts given the sensitivity of brain data. Like, how do you guys plan to distinguish between medical data and a person's private thoughts when collecting brain activity?
In our first clinical trial, we'll be recording from the area of the brain that expresses your intended speech, which still may be private. Now, the intention...
Tend to slap you, but I'm still thinking about it.
So we won't be reading out people's like private inner speech, but only what they're trying to voice. But it still raises all the same privacy concerns that you have when you communicate over Gmail or with ChatGPT. That also means that we can have, let's say, consumer level neurotech privacy. I think it's realistic to expect that brain-computer interfaces of this generation will be able to protect data in the same way that you can have encryption on your computer that protects you against everyone in this room. I think it's still going to be very hard to protect your data against the top 5 national governments. We'll have iPhone-level security.
Hi, myself, Dr. Jamal. I'm a former professor in cancer research. I'm building AI-powered all-in-one wellness platform. And so it intrigued me regarding mental wellness, because that's one of the component of whole wellness. So I have a question, like how and if we can use this technology for mental wellness, and if it can be done. So if we can done, then use it on a Vitalistic, which is my startup. Can it be available to most of the general public to enhance their mental wellness? And it should be not like implantable kind of thing. In general, like a helmet, cap, or something, ring, you put it on the head or somewhere in the head space, and so that it is easy to use, and which can be used concurrently with the AI technology to enhance your judgment and give you feedback. So this way, most of the people can use your technology to have a better judgment and enhance mental wellness.
Yeah, so our technology is implantable technology. So in the long arc of time, I think that a lot of people will choose to get brain implant technology, even people who are getting it for something other than restoration of function. In the short term, it's going to be for unmet medical needs for serious medical conditions. And people will choose to get these kinds of like helmet applications when they work, which is limited situations where you don't need that much data. What we're going to see in both cases is that devices are going to be made for conditions, let's say, like depression. There's a woman at USC, Mariam Shanecki, who was putting electrodes on people's brains who had epilepsy and were in the epilepsy monitoring unit. And so she had a chance to observe them over a period of time, and they could ask questions like, how are you feeling? It turns out that just those kind of old school clinical surface grid electrodes are capable of predicting how someone's feeling based on brain activity. That kind of thing could be fed into mental health paradigms for serious unmet medical needs like treatment-resistant depression. But what will happen is that when tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have brain implants for these kind of conditions, and we know the safety profiles, we know how they work, someone who maybe doesn't have that severe of depression or just wants to understand their own mood could make a rational decision that I'd actually like to get that device just for my own purposes. And we could see a transition a little bit like how I mentioned continuous glucose monitors. Now you go to the gym and you see that there are biohackers and health aficionados who have them who don't have diabetes. That kind of trend will happen.
But then you'll turn into Brian Johnson. And then soon enough, you'll be selling gummies online. I just wanted to say something generally about anytime when you have such an incredible technology come out and what has to change in our culture. I mean, we're comfortable taking a shot of Ozempic, right? You're putting something in your body. We're even comfortable now with some gene editing. We're comfortable with gene therapy treatments that are one-time treatments, whereas a virus that's edited, loaded up, it's going to live side by side inside you forever. That's an implant, if you ask me, which is another company of ours.
And what makes people more comfortable is data and transparency.
Exactly. So even though this sounds like an electrical device that is inside you, in many ways, actually, it's less invasive and less permanent, if you want it to be, than something like a one-time treatment in which they alter your genetic blueprint of your body and the way it's going to behave forever after that. So I think there's going to be a cultural shift that needs to come in which people get more and more comfortable with this. And as you saw, it sounds like, oh my God, it's my brain, but it's really not as big a deal as we all think right now.
No, that's a great point. I mean, even sometimes the concept of clinical invasiveness has to be revisited because getting a brain implant seems like, yeah, that's really invasive, but taking a pill, that seems like really easy, except that opiates are incredibly invasive. A lot of powerful drugs that people take for mental health conditions are even more invasive than brain implants and can be much more ruinous. And so it's worth thinking.
Kind of not just about surgery versus not surgery, but
what is the net impact on someone's health in terms of risk, and what is the net impact on someone's health in terms of benefit?
I have another question, I think.
Hi, Matt. Hi, Reema. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marwa Zafrullah. I'm a neuroscientist at the Stanford School of Medicine, and I'm currently specializing in neuromuscular disorders. I would say first, thank you so much. This is such an enlightening and much-needed discussion, and I'm being very happy that I'm sitting in this room. I'm listening this flavor of BCI in multiple different domains, and there's a very different discussion that is going on in academics as that is going on in industry right now. My curiosity right now is that from a clinical perspective, what are you thinking as the ethical and safety challenges in the long-term implementation of a BCI with this very traditional clinical setting? As you mentioned by yourself, Matt, that we have the old school clinical structure that is still very much in place. And I would say we are very blessed that we are sitting in a Silicon Valley, very specifically in this hardware. There's such a progressive mindset. And therapeutic and medicine is moving really fast. But if we are thinking about the implementation across the globe, let's say just within United States, the mindset has a huge resistance, right? So I was want to know how you are envisioning, what are those challenges from an ethical and safety prospect and how you're thinking to tackling with them. Thank you.
Well, yeah, actually, I think that we should think about brain implants in a more traditional clinical sense when we're thinking about the costs and the benefits. And so I'll give an example. The hardware that I mentioned that was invented in 1989, it's called the Utah Array. It's distributed by a company called BlackRock Neurotech. It has a kind of pedestal that mounts on the skull. It comes through the skin. There's like a cord that connects to a computer. It looks all very archaic, but it's been used in clinical trials now for about 20 years, and there's neurologist Dan Rubin at Mass General Hospital that's published a summary of clinical safety outcomes for what's called the BrainGate program using this kind of archaic-looking device. And guess what? Actually, the rate of adverse events is really low, and it's actually arguably safer than traditional deep brain stimulators. And so if we look at these brain implants, even just from a very narrow clinical lens, we would say actually changes in neurological endpoints are almost nothing. The areas that we're implanting these brain implants into right now are areas that can't even connect to the body anymore.
And so actually really the cost
benefit in the first step makes a ton of sense. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to us talk about things that sound really crazy. But my hope I will leave you with something a little more philosophical in vein with how I always think, which is that the limit to our work is when there's a thought in your head, it turns into your intention. The intention turns into an action, and then it translates into what you do. But the limits of our mind are the limits of our bodies and the limits of our devices. When you take more and more of those limits away, I think it's only for us to see what will come out of our minds. And when everyone's talking about comparing artificial intelligence with human intelligence and abilities, I think it's interesting to see what we can unlock in the human ability and human mind when many of the barriers that are the limits of the body and the action and the devices go away. So the future looks interesting and bright, and a lot of our kids are going to be, I think, at some intersection of, human and machine. So it's about time we talk about it, even if it sounds like taboo. But thank you for your patience in listening to us. Thank you.